Welcome, everyone, to this last episode of the series called The Celestial Mandala of Service, where we'll discover the 12th constellation of the Wheel of the Zodiac that is called Pisces, and which is associated with the service field of new religion. And we hopefully will discover a reality that will underpin a greater livingness of the unity of life in the new era. My name's Lorraine Flower, and I'm a member of the Community of Living Ethics and your host for this podcast today. When we talk about Pisces, we often hear about redemption, and in fact, Pisces is the sign of Christ, the Redeemer, the Saviour of the world. The age of Pisces, which is drawing to a close, began with the birth of Christ, who came to anchor on earth the energy of love, with the intention that it be spread among men and women to enable the redemption of planet Earth. Redemption is a constant process that takes place in daily life, opening up to a higher vision of reality that goes beyond the form, which is aimed often only at itself, and towards developing the will, where we want to qualify our actions to the note of love. In this way, we collaborate in the evolutionary passage that humanity, as an active expression of the intelligence of the earth, is called to accomplish. Pisces is the last of the three water signs, preceded by Cancer and Scorpio. Water is the symbol of emotion, that is, the world of feelings and desires, whose psycho-spiritual function is that of purification. The glyph of this sign represents two fishes, firmly bound to each other by the sutratma, the thin silver thread, which keeps the soul and the personality firmly united as they swim in the vastness of the oceanic waters during the cycle of life. Pisces, as a point of light in the zodiac, is termed light of the world, which is one of the many names given to Christ in the Gospels. Humanity lives immersed in matter, and is one of the mottos of Pisces states, tends to descend into matter until the experience itself reveals the inner spiritual essence, freeing us from this slavery. Then we become the Saviour, who by placing ourselves in the service of the higher self, radiate our light, love, and power through our own actions, emotions, and thoughts. We also know that the constellation conveys energies of love, wisdom, and idealism and devotion. And we read in the texts of the ancient wisdom that it will be incumbent upon the group of religion workers working under the inspiration of the Christ and under the influence of the second ray of love, wisdom, to formulate a universal platform of the new world religion, which will accentuate the unity and fellowship of spirit. So it is evident at this point that Pisces is connected to the religious expression of the human being. And today we will try to understand in a broad vision what the commitment of each human being can be to manifest a new world religion. I'm delighted to welcome Don McGregor to help us deepen this understanding. Don is a retired Anglican priest, an ex-science teacher, an author, speaker, and long-term student of Ageless Wisdom teachings. He's worked in both England and Wales as a teacher, vicar, interfaith officer, and retreat leader. I'm delighted to welcome Don McGregor to help us to deepen this understanding. Don is a retired Anglican priest, an ex-science teacher, an author, speaker, and long-term student of Ageless Wisdom teachings. He's worked in both England and Wales as a teacher, vicar, interfaith officer, and retreat leader. Welcome, Don.
Thank you. Welcome.
It's so lovely to have you here with us, and your experience and wisdom, I feel, is going to make you a really appropriate guest to help us understand how to further our understanding of this expression of new religion, a new expression of how we might understand our spirituality. And I'm going to kick off with an initial question, which might be challenging for some, but I think is important, which is, When we speak about religion, and particularly in the West, we make a lot of references to the Christ, to Jesus, to Christ, and to religion, and all that comes with that. And we know it can be a very challenging subject for many. How can we open ourselves to a new way of relating to this idea of religion and the practice of all that it entails?
Yes, it's quite difficult. The word religion is said to come from religare in Latin, meaning to bind back, to kind of reconnect. So re-establishing the connection between humanity and God, or the earthly realm and the kingdom of souls. I suppose to awaken to the true self that we are as incarnated souls. And the problem, of course, is that religion has got a bad rep. Through all the sort of difficulties of religion in the past, and the title New World Religion, I don't think fits well with today's sensibilities, because it's got overtones really of authority, control, and formal institutions. I actually prefer the term universal spirituality, which is much more kind of open and accepting. And, there's so many terms that spirituality can cover. And I do believe there is an emerging spirituality. Since the early 90s and the New Age movement, which of course was kicked off way back by Alice Bailey's books. But since then, that which was hidden and occult and esoteric has been rediscovered and is now being brought up into the open. And it's in a way making the esoteric exoteric. It's bubbling up in many places, in many strands of thought. And I think this is to do with the energies of the seventh ray and the age of Aquarius beginning to take hold. It's the ageless wisdom teachings popping up in diverse guises and thus appealing to different people. I think with regard to the term Christ, which is used a lot within the ageless wisdom teachings, particularly the DK and Alice Bailey, I think there is a problem in that popular culture will forever associate that term Christ with Christianity and Jesus, with little further discernment or investigation. I've been following Richard Rohr, an American Franciscan priest, and he's done a lot of work disentangling Jesus from the Christ in his book called The Universal Christ. And I've also myself made a smaller offering coming out in April called The Christ and Jesus, The Difference, just to get the plug in there. But Richard Rohr's phrase to distinguish between Jesus and the Christ is, Jesus is the union of human and divine in space and time, but Christ is the eternal union of matter and spirit from the beginning of time. Now, of course, the wisdom teachings go a lot further than that in telling us that Christ is both a divine principle throughout creation, but also a position held by a master within the hierarchy. But for those not familiar with those deeper teachings and only seeing the Christ within Christianity, I do think maybe we need to go down the route of reterming the Christ as the love wisdom principle, active throughout all religions and all spiritualities, because I think that moves us towards what the deeper understanding of the Christ is about, the coming of love wisdom, the revealing of the God of love, but also the understanding of the depth of this throughout the whole of the universe and creation. The love wisdom principle is maybe something that could be adopted rather than the term the Christ all the time.
Don, I think that you've raised some really key points there in terms of how we as a humanity, how people in general tend to relate to this notion of religion and indeed the Christ, and bringing in the love wisdom part feels to me to be really important. And I'm wondering whether you are able to bring some sort of concrete examples of where you're seeing the expression of love coming more to the fore. You mentioned that, from the 90s, you have a sense that things are becoming more externalized. We're making more connection between our inner self and the outer self, the higher self and the material self. But in kind of fairly practical terms, what's your sense of how love is starting to become more pervasive, if we see this as an expression of a new spirituality or a reconnected spirituality?
I think probably from my own experience, the best thing is to, in 1993, I became a Christian priest and I was ministering in churches for 24 years before I retired. And during, I don't know, the last 50 years, I think even the teaching of Christianity has moved hugely. Whereas it used to be somebody standing up in the pulpit and preaching hellfire and damnation if you didn't amend your ways, it's gone over far more to the teaching and really the centrality of the teaching of Jesus, which was about to love your neighbor as yourself, even to love your enemy, to do to others as you would have them do to you, and so on. And I think the centrality of love has both been taught more and experienced more within those Christian churches which are alive, as I would put it. Not all are.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because if we take it even outside of the church environment, it comes to mind to me that we see love expressed in some of the issues confronting humanity at this point in time. So whether we go back to the kind of depth of the COVID time, where people were loving their neighbor by maybe popping in or bringing groceries or going to the pharmacy or doing whatever was needed to keep a community healthy, or now obviously in the more recent issues with the earthquake and the disasters that are going on, coming out of that, and or the disaster itself and the consequences of it. And we see that notion not only of just governmental humanitarian aid, but a genuine movement, an outpouring of love and care and concern across humanity in from all sorts of quarters, which in a sense seems to be apolitical and non-religious. It seems to be a true expression of the heart. Do these feel to you like a natural move, or has it always been this way?
I think the move from Pisces to Aquarius, the Piscean age to the Aquarian age, it is shifting things. The age of Pisces has been an age of devotion and emotional attachment to a higher being. But the age of Aquarius is bringing more of the mental understanding into it as well. So we're having a blending of mind and heart, and people are realizing that something has got to be done about the way in which humanity is facing these problems, rather than just expecting the governments to do it all, or the leaders, or those in authority. The grassroots are coming up and saying, no, stop, something else has got to be done. There's got to be a better way than this. And I think that's the kind of love wisdom aspect coming in, the mind and the heart working together.
I think for many people, the idea of wisdom can be, again, a challenging one. Do people consider themselves to be wise? Do they understand that bringing together of the mind and the heart together? And I suppose when I think about that on a very everyday level, that joining together of the heart and the mind feels like it's a different calibration of the emotional body. So it instead of being just an outpouring of pain or drama, it's a movement. It feels to me like it's a movement from the activation of the heart and the love, but taking that forward into a practical application, in a sense, so that it's a livingness rather than an emotional response, if I can describe it that way. Does that feel relevant to you?
Yes, that makes sense. I like that term, a livingness, rather than an emotional response. I think it's a deeper engagement rather than just this sort of lower level of engagement from the energy that's coming from the solar plexus center is very different from the energy that comes from the heart. And I think humanity has been engaged in that sort of lower level of emotional energy rather than the higher level of love and compassion that comes from the energies of the heart. And I think that's maybe the difference as humanity is approaching what is called first initiation across the board. So we expect to see that shift happening, I think, from lower to higher emotional energies and to engage with the mental body as well.
Some would say that we really are only at the very beginning stages of understanding truly what is meant by love, and we've referred to the Piscean era, where for 2,000 years people were in that more devotional space, as you said, and responding more to the teachings of love from that perspective. And this call to step up to a new expression of love, a new understanding of love, which we're associating with a new religion or a universal spirituality, perhaps calls us to recognize more of the signs of this happening and to join the dots a little bit more in our own awareness and in the awareness of people around us. How might we see the world through different eyes and start to see that shift in the expression of love, and therefore the livingness of a new religion or a livingness of a new spirituality, so that it's taken out of the church or out of the mosque or out of, not to be disrespectful to religion itself, but to bring it out into our everyday life? Where might we see some of those signs? How might we start to join some of those dots?
Well, I think to my mind, love is a force of attraction, and it's vastly more than the sentimental emotion that we think of daily. Coincidentally, as we're recording this, it's actually Valentine's Day, with all the loving expression and the sentiments that come with that. But if we think of love as a force of attraction, working at every level of reality, then it can actually be seen as a driver for evolution. Because I think love is that which brings things into further and deeper relationship. And looking at the big picture and going back to the Big Bang, when this universe came into being, or so we're told by the scientists, quantum particles were brought into relationship to form atoms. Those basic elements started to interact to form molecules, and a complexity of relationship developed. Now, eventually, this driving evolutionary force of attraction formed organic compounds, which then came together to form simple single-celled organisms, living beings reacting to their environment. But then deeper relationships formed, multicellular creatures that could reproduce, at first just by copying themselves, but then sexual relationships came about, and love as an attraction between the sexes came out into the open and developed qualities of nurture and care. And so we can see that the force of love has driven forward this ever deeper, more complex relationship structure. So I believe love is actually a divine evolutionary force underlying the formation and continuous evolution of the universe, so much more than just a sentiment.
Thank you. That's really it's a really vivid picture of that magnetic force in action, and it has an almost inexorable feel about it. That it is an unfolding. It's almost a birthright, if you will, that we're ever moving towards, and yet as humanity, we're also sentient beings. So we're more than simply an organic process. We have free will, don't we? We have the freedom to make choices. So we can participate in this evolutionary journey in many ways. When we look to our world, I mean, I'm thinking about the business world, the society, schools, whatever, that all of these areas are starting to see some conscious shifts in the way we relate to each other. You brought in relationship there. So, for example, whether it's the equality, diversity, and inclusion movements, whether it's the way in which organizations think about their culture and their values and what that means for people who are part of that organization, whether it's about some of the activists who are standing up for a deeper level of ethics or morality or what is right. My sense is we're seeing some of that magnetic process happening, not just in the kind of space of love as we might traditionally have defined it, but in some quite unusual ways. Do you see these are part of that evolutionary scientific process also? And where's free will in all of that?
Well, yeah, I think free will is obviously, built into humanity. And we learn as much from our mistakes as we do from our successes. In fact, probably more from our mistakes than our successes. And I think throughout all these sort of areas of human endeavor, we can see things beginning to change and move on. And I think this is the driving force of love, or the plan, if we like to call it that. The various energies that are coming in at this time to bring us into a new age and a new way of being. And it's affecting, everything: education, finance, politics, across the raft of everything that we as human beings do in society. And it will, in different places and different cultures, it will come out differently, but it's the underlying energy below it that is making itself felt. And the driving force of love to bring us into better relationships, to express more goodwill, and to make the world gradually, very slowly, little step by little step, to make the world a better place. And a more kind of soul-infused place, if you like, for humanity to exist in.
Don, thank you for that. And as we come towards the end of our very brief time, and I know there's so much more we could cover, we like to leave our listeners with one thought, a quote, a phrase, an idea that maybe can be of use as we all go about our daily lives. And I just wondered whether there was something that you felt you could offer that would be obviously not a summary of everything we've said, but something that just kind of has its own magnetic resonance that could be useful as people go away and contemplate further this idea of universal spirituality and new religion and the place of love as that magnetic force.
Okay, yes. I think the New World religion will be more of a universal spiritual philosophy that applies to all life, marked by the human development of qualities of loving understanding, selfless service, joy, goodwill, and right relations between all beings. So in a sentence, maybe that's how I see the New World religion.
Wonderful. Thank you. That gives, I think, everybody something to work with, to reflect on, and to recognize that this is actually a fundamental part of who we are. It's not something separate from us. It is very much embedded within who we are. It's our core spirit. It's our core soul. It's our core heart expression. So thank you for that. And thank you for being with us today. We really, really appreciate your
You're
time.
welcome.
And to all our listeners, thank you for traveling with us in this series of podcasts. We'll be back with other series in the future, but for now, we're signing off and wish you a very joyful and uplifting contribution to our human evolution. Thank you. This podcast was offered by the Community of Living Ethics, Umbria, Italy, and freely inspired by Aldebaran, the community's Astrosophy group, and by our research on service.